Chapter 9. Peeling the Onion. Healing Old Karma. In the intervening 2 weeks, which included the Thanksgiving holiday, Carl seemed to have picked something up, as we refer to it. Robert, Lisa, and I all felt him before he arrived, and whatever he had was already engaging Robert and me. We were both extremely nauseated, which usually indicates a demonic presence, so we barely settled into our seats before reciting a prayer for protection and calling in our guides. Whatever Carl had, there seemed to be more than one. Archangel Michael was able to remove them and send them to the light so they weren't reptilians. Lisa saw an image of something around Carl's throat. First snakes, and then they turned into a noose. Carl had been to see Margaret, the medical intuitive I'd referred him to, several times since our last session, and he told us she had seen some kind of an alien-like creature clamped around his head. Lisa said it could have been the same thing she'd just seen around his neck. She sensed it had taken a great deal of effort on the part of our guides to pull it, or them, out of him. But Carl was supposed to have been under special protection, so how had they gotten in? Margaret had seen a hole in Carl's aura where something had been removed. The hole was now healing, but as Robert said, it could open up again. Another psychic who had been at Margaret's office when Carl was there saw a sucking kind of creature at the base of his skull. And when Margaret went over to Carl's house to do a thorough cleanse, she told him he was being attacked in his sleep. It seemed he was being bombarded. A battle was being waged, and he was the battleground. But why? Robert suggested that the demons and the reptilians didn't want to give up what they'd lost. Margaret had told Carl he'd gone over to the dark side a number of times in previous lives, and she thought he was on the fence in this one. The battle lines had been drawn between the darkness and the light. Then Archangel Michael removed something else from Carl, pulling it up and out of him. Carl said it felt like a rope being drawn up from the middle of his belly. Lisa saw lots of fire in his belly, and lots of anger, eyes of red fire. She told him that after she had seen his eyes in an earlier session, they had made such a strong an impression on her that it had taken a couple of days for her to get rid of the sense of rage they'd left her with. Margaret, too, had seen Carl's anger, which he had already acknowledged several times. After suffering physically for more than 15 years, he was extremely angry and frustrated. His weak auric shield was allowing these things to get in, but there was some good news along with the bad. Jesus and the archangels now had dominion over him. Carl believed he'd picked up whatever he'd gotten right after his last session with us, possibly later that night. He'd actually begun feeling bad a day or two earlier. These entities may have already been bothering him when we last saw him, but I hadn't felt them in his energy field then. And it's unusual for someone to pick something up that quickly after a healing session, so we were all a bit confused about what was going on. Archangel Michael took yet another one out of him. As soon as the three of us focused on sending him light, another one went, and then one more. We continued filling Carl with light, while Lisa tried to see what these things were. She thought they were related to his karma, to the lifetimes in which he had held positions of power and had used it for destructive purposes. She saw many people being hanged, burned, and otherwise injured from his abuses of power. Margaret had told Carl that because of the things he'd done in the past, he'd given up his power before coming into this lifetime. I remember when I was about 19, I had thoughts that I didn't understand, Carl said. I felt that I had to be careful not to do what I'd done before. A feeling that I had power and that I had to be very careful not to become a Hitler or something like that. But I didn't understand where these thoughts were coming from. I thought maybe it was something any teenager would come up with. When the rest of us told him we hadn't any thoughts like that when we were 19, Carl said he guessed he had been remembering something from his past lives. The Arcturians had come to Lisa when she was on her way to our session to tell her we would need to call on their crystal light, so we continued sending lots and lots of light to Carl, and after a while his auric shield began to feel better, more intact, and he seemed more relaxed. The process Carl was going through, which we were going through with him, was akin to peeling the layers of an onion. Now that all the other entities had been removed, he had an opportunity to heal a considerable amount of his karma. He might even get to a point where he could do some work on this lifetime. Margaret had told Carl he'd been taking things on from other people and carrying them in his third chakra. So when Robert balanced Carl's chakras, he concentrated on the third, which was in need of reinforcement. The focus of that chakra is a mental body and willpower, and Carl's willpower definitely needed strengthening. After Robert finished, Carl said he felt quite a bit calmer. I still wanted to know why the protection hadn't worked for him after we'd been told he would be protected because of the vulnerable state he was in. What had happened? As we tried to figure it out, we finally realized that nothing had failed to work or gone wrong. Nothing new had come in, so he had been protected. All of what we were dealing with now was karmic. It had been there all along, buried beneath several of those onion layers. Even before Carl arrived for this session, I had told the others I thought we would be working with past life issues today. Karma plays a role in our lives, and none of the guides will interfere with someone's karma, because if they did, it would have a negative impact on their own karma. That's a universal law of cause and effect. And when karmic issues are involved, you can't always resolve everything in one healing, and maybe not even in one lifetime. But now that Carl had nothing new coming in that he was forced to deal with, these older, pre-existing issues were being allowed to come to the surface to be healed. Please go to my website and read about how to release your karma once and for all forever. Since this book was printed, new information has come in concerning karma and how to release it, and that karma is controlled by one karma demon. So you'll find on my website and YouTube information on how to release your karma, all of your karma, once and for all, to get completely off the karmic wheel. Completely, 100%. I guarantee it. So please go to www.waynebrewer.net and listen to that free information that can help you resolve your karma forever. Carl said that immediately after the last balancing Margaret did for him, which occurred 2 nights ago, he began feeling extremely ill. She tried to do more cleansing to help him, but nothing seemed to work. He continued to feel awful. Just about everything, my back, my gut, everything was going crazy on me. That made sense. What Carl was going through now had nothing to do with the reptilians or any other entities. This was pure Carl at the soul level. With all the entities gone and so much light and energy being pumped into him, his soul was seizing this new opportunity to heal and release the older issues. And those issues were coming up fast, incredibly fast. The reptilians never would have allowed it to happen while they were in control. Arcturians speak to Carl. As this realization gradually dawned on us, the energy in the room became very high, and I sensed the Arcturians wanted to communicate with us. Robert agreed to channel them. I asked the Arcturians if we were on the right path with Carl. They said that we were. I also wanted to know if Carl would begin experiencing any relief in the near future. Relief from his physical symptoms specifically, but also emotional and spiritual relief, which were equally important. The Arcturians told us that, as we'd surmised, energies are now coming forth which could not be cleared before, and they were assisting us in clearing them. It is entirely Carl's decision and choice as to how much he chooses to cleanse at this time, they said. He is making the most of the opportunity, for he understands that he is able to sustain this level of cleansing. They were aware all 4 of us were expecting better health for Carl as a result of the work we were doing with them, but there was a caveat. It is not that the health should be denied, but there is an opportunity for cleansing and healing here, which is what Carl has elected to do. It is, if you wish, a fast track, the Arcturian said. They reiterated that balancing the cleansing and healing with physical improvement was up to Carl. Lisa asked if they could provide some assistance in the way of physical comfort during this period of cleansing and purification. The Arcturian said they were already doing that. However, the person who was driving the process was Carl. It was his choice as to how much physical discomfort he wanted to endure. He could always request a reduction in the speed with which the energies are clearing, and if he did so, he would have a period of respite. The Arcturians recommended 3 to 5 days of rest, during which they and any other healing forces Carl called upon would repair and restock his energy levels. Carl wasn't sure exactly what he needed to do to slow this process down. The Arcturians told him he simply needed to ask. They suggested he do it aloud, which would give him more confidence that what he was asking for would happen. They even gave him the words to use. Please slow down this process or suspend it for the moment. In its place, please bring through healing light and love energy now. They told Carl that as soon as he asked for it, they would provide it. He wanted to know if he would feel better if he slowed things down a great deal. Well, the simple answer was yes, but the full answer was more complicated, and the situation did not appear to be as straightforward as it had originally sounded. The Arcturians told Carl to remember that his soul was also driving the process. You have your personality in the third dimension, they said, the small you, and you have the large you at the higher dimensions, which can see the greater picture. It is exploiting the opportunity that you have before you, for this window of opportunity does not last forever. Those who offer their light and service to you cannot continue to do this for the years to come, and the soul knows this. It is making the most of the moment. Carl indicated he understood. Lisa asked the Arcturians if any portals in Carl were still open. They said no, but because he was bringing up new energies into his body for cleansing and release, links or connections to other energies had to be properly healed. If not, they would leave space that could be filled by energies of a similar, such as a lower frequency. That seems to be what had occurred as a result of Carl's recent work with Margaret. The Arcturians also told Carl there were no more open portals in his house. An excellent job of cleansing and protecting had been done there. All the portals were closed now, and no more should open unless Carl invited them in or otherwise elected to have them there. Lisa wanted to know if Carl could heal his past life crimes just by acknowledging them. Was that enough? The Arcturians answered that those actions Carl had taken were choices, and all choices, however we judge them either now or at the time they were made, gain experience. We shouldn't think of them as bad experiences, but simply as experiences, which were energy in action and which therefore had consequences. They said what he is now doing is bringing all of those unfinished pieces of energy to a point of conclusion and culmination, and this is done through healing. The Arcturians weren't sure we understood completely, and neither were we, so they tried to make themselves clearer to Carl. At the moment you perceive yourself as Carl in this lifetime, from a multi-dimensional perspective, you are many different personalities, and you have lived many different lifetimes, and endured, in some cases, some very challenging experiences. You were unable to, at that time, complete all of the energy work required. Because the frequency in which you now exist is higher, you are asking that all of those loose ends be brought together and tied up. This is a point of opportunity to heal and cleanse. I asked the Arcturians to confirm that Carl, or at least Carl's soul, wanted to be on this fast track, and they said he did. Were Robert, Lisa, and I to continue working with him until he was able to release us and move forward on his own? They said that was a choice for each one of us to make individually. Carl was still trying to get someone to give him a time frame. The Arcturians told him that the next 3 to 4 months would be the best time to take advantage of the opportunity being presented to him. Although the work wouldn't necessarily take that long, would he be healthier and feel better physically at the end of that time? Again, that depended on the amount of work he did and the balance he chose between processing and resting. Carl said he hoped he could deal with his fear of suffering and of the unknown. Surround yourself with love and light. The Arcturians encouraged Carl to request the highest frequency of love whenever he received healings. That which gives the wisdom to know that there is no duality, that in essence, fear is the absence of love. Surround yourself with love and light at every opportunity. This will sustain you and protect you. They told him they were bringing through that frequency right now, and as a result, he might feel a little lightheaded or lighter. Sustain your energy at a higher frequency, they said. This is your greatest protection against fear. Although Carl was concerned about his ability to bring that frequency through, the Arcturians told him he could do it. We would tell you that you are powerful, In many incarnations, you have been an exceptionally powerful individual and have used energy and power, not always in the way you might choose were you in a similar situation. But you do have the capacity to bring through much, much power. It is available to you because you are reconnecting yourself with each of your previous and future lives. You are remembering that you are a multidimensional being outside the constraints of time and space. You have that power at your fingertips, should you choose. You are much more powerful than you can possibly conceive at this time. This is why you are seen as so valuable. Although Carl was concerned about his ability to bring that frequency through, the Arcturians told him he could do it. We would tell you that you are powerful. In many incarnations, you have been an exceptionally powerful individual and have used energy and power, not always in the way you might choose were you in a similar situation, but you do have the capacity to bring through much, much power. It is available to you because you are reconnecting yourself with each of your previous and future lives. You are remembering that you are a multidimensional being outside the constraints of time and space. You have that power at your fingertips, should you choose. You are much more powerful than you can possibly conceive at this time. This is why you are seen as so valuable. So is Carl the only thing holding Carl back now? The Arcturians suggested it was actually Carl's ego that was holding him back. The personality or ego that is referred to as Carl has some growth to do. It is always difficult for the ego because it does not like change. Carl's soul has changed the status quo, and the ego is feeling very uncomfortable with this. This will be an exploration for you through your heart center with your soul. There are opportunities coming for you very soon where you would be able to open up to much, much more light through channeling or healing. They also described a simple relaxation process he could use at any time to help him get in touch with his heart. So much energy had been pumped into the room that the three of us were feeling much better than we had at the beginning of the session. Carl's body, on the other hand, had begun tightening up. I'm just feeling that shivering feeling again, very much like fear. He told us that from time to time his body suddenly tensed up this way with fear. When that happened, he didn't feel strong enough to push the fear away. And it had been happening more and more frequently. Carl had been dealing with all of these physical issues, the tightening and misery and inflammation, for many years. But it was his fear, rather than his physical symptoms, that alarmed him the most. Having to try to calm down is pretty difficult, he said. Robert led us through a healing that did help Carl relax and feel calmer. He was still a little bit tight, but considerably less tense and afraid. He told us his right brain just didn't want to open up. Yet he made a connection between starting to get sick many years ago and his first experiences of trying to open up and let the light in. Right after I had my first Reiki attunement, I had a severe crisis with my skin for about a week and a half, he said. Things just kept getting worse after that. But he told us he'd felt a lot of energy movement today. In fact, he was surprised at how much he'd been able to feel compared to past healings. Lisa said his auric field was much stronger now, and he would be leaving here in much better shape. Throughout the course of our work with Carl, she had been sending love and light to him at random times, showering him with light whenever she thought of him. She promised to continue doing that. I asked him to let us know how he was doing over the course of the next 2 weeks, because if we knew what to focus on, we could direct healing energy to wherever he needed it at that time. He asked us to send the calm. Robert wanted Carl to rest for a few days and allow himself to build up his energy and rejuvenate himself. He had just gone through a major purification and detoxification, so resting was absolutely the best thing he could do. Carl planned to continue working with Margaret after a short hiatus. A service for humanity. We believed our group healings had accomplished what we had been brought together to do. All the entities had been removed from Carl. We had been introduced to the reptilians, and we had developed a connection with the Arcturians, which was a great blessing. But none of us felt that the work with Carl was finished, and we were open to meeting with him again. Perhaps, however, Carl was now ready to work on issues from this lifetime, and Margaret might be better suited to assist him with that at this point. There are so many questions about Carl that we'll never get clear and definite answers to. Had his soul made the decision that he would give up his power in this lifetime? Is the point or goal of this life the atonement for his past abuses of power, the crimes he committed, and the suffering he caused so many other people? I can't and don't want to predict the future. But if that's the case, maybe it isn't in the cards for him to get significantly better. Even if he doesn't experience a radical change in this lifetime, all the karma he has healed and is healing will give him a better, fresher start the next time around. In the meantime, Carl has done a fantastic service for humanity, which may be part of his atonement. He has been a catalyst in my journey, and I personally have a great deal of love and appreciation for him, for being willing to show up over and over again, and for allowing the rest of us to learn from his extremely difficult and painful situation. At the very beginning, the message we heard was that Carl was supposed to write a book. Carl was no writer, but even more to the point, his body was so ravaged and he was in so much pain, no one could imagine him undertaking a project like writing a book. Yet 2 years later, here is this book. This book would not exist were it not for Carl. So what exactly was the message we were hearing? Communications occasionally get garbled in the course of being sent and received, even between humans, but especially between humans and multidimensional beings. And sometimes we translate them incorrectly as they pass through our personal filters. But Carl doesn't have to write a book because the information is right here. It's getting out to the people who need to read it and who can understand it and benefit from it. Carl has done his part in bringing the book to fruition. That task for him has been completed.